What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Worlds Collide, and we're doing reaction videos from, shockingly, Company Man, with two companies that I hold near and dear, and I have a very love-hate relationship. I'm joined also here today by Ms Diva Talks. Say what happened to the people.
What's up, y'all?
In this video here, it's from Dish Network versus DirecTV. One of them I hate really, really, really bad. One of them I love really, really a lot. So, without further ado,
Which one?
You'll figure it out.
I want to know now.
Well, alright. So, should I give a backstory?
I would.
Alright, so here's the backstory.
You hate one and love one so much.
So, I used to work for Blockbuster back in the day, who was owned by Dish Network.
Ah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm sure Company Man go touch base, and if he don't, I just schooled y'all on something. But Dish Network bought Blockbuster out of bankruptcy.
That's definitely a tongue twister.
It really is. Out of bankruptcy, and they're supposed to be opening more stores and all this fun stuff, but they lied, and I was supposed to be promoted to like assistant store manager back in the day, and I was like, oh my god, cool, and
Didn't happen.
didn't happen, and the store ended up closing, and all the stores closed. But it was cool because I was working at Target anyway. So.
All right, that's I guess a good reason to hate them.
And
and you love the other one.
And DirecTV, yes, I love them because they pay my bill, keep the lights. I've got lights, so
You work for them now. All right.
yeah. So
Perfect reasons.
I'm an industry hub. I've been through every cable company out here.
Okay.
But let's go ahead and get in this video. Let's get it.
Dish Network and DirecTV have been two of the largest providers of satellite television. They were among the first to offer it, they helped shape the industry, and even today, decades later, I'll bet that there are still the only two that most of us even know about. Whenever there's two companies like this that stand out above the rest of their industry, I think it's cool to take a look back at them. How they've grown, how they've competed, and how everything has taken form into what it is today. Now, I don't want to get too technical about the early days of satellite television because it's certainly not one of my stronger subjects, but to my understanding, before the 1990s, the technology just wasn't there. If you wanted satellite television at your home, it would cost you thousands of dollars to buy one of these absurdly large dishes that operated on C-band wave.
It's a big ass dish.
It's a couple people in the hood who still got them though in their backyards.
Lengths. The signal strength led to low quality images, there weren't that many channels available, so if the choice came down to getting either cable or satellite service, almost any sane person would go with cable. But around the 1990s, there were advancements in satellite technology, including digital compression, that made it possible for a smaller, less expensive dish to receive a clearer signal, meaning it was now looking practical for a satellite service to compete with a cable service, and there were a few companies out there that saw this as an opportunity. The most notable ones that later became known as Dish Network and DirecTV. Early on, the biggest challenge for both of them and anyone else who wanted to start their own satellite service was the money that it took to get started. I'm talking about obtaining licenses, making deals with television networks, for heaven's sake, building and launching satellites. So unless you had a way to quickly obtain hundreds of millions of dollars, I would not even recommend attempting it. When comparing the two, this may have been the biggest difference at one point, because DirecTV started from a much wealthier position. In 1985, General Motors bought Hughes Aircraft for about $5 billion. The name of that comes from Howard Hughes because it stemmed from the company that he had started decades earlier. They were a significant supplier to the military and the country's largest maker of communication satellites. So GM took that acquisition, combined it with another segment of theirs, and renamed it Hughes Electronics Corporation. So in the 1990s, when they were looking to expand their satellite operations into establishing one of the first home satellite television services, it was easy enough to secure $750 million from their massive parent company of General Motors. They used a lot of that money to build their own satellite that was launched into orbit in 1993. That same year, they made deals with all these television networks, allowing them to carry their channels, and in 1994, the service named DirecTV was made available to the public. For Dish Network, it was a little more complicated. In 1980, Charles Ergen started a business that would make and sell those big C-band satellites. But by the end of the 1980s, he too saw an opportunity for the home television.
I just want to point this out. This dude has always been a force, with Dish Network. Like, this dude still is basically, if I might understand this correctly, he is still in control of Dish Network. Like that's like almost probably I would like to say the longest tenure of a company CEO or whatever. Because most of them get kicked out like after like 15 years.
But I mean, keep your nose clean.
Yeah.
So
nose candy.
Service. He spent the next few years securing a license to do it from the FCC, and by 1994, he was in need of a substantial amount of money. You won't hear it often on this channel, but he raised a few $100 million by essentially selling junk bonds at a 13% return. It was seen as a high-risk investment, so he needed to provide a high return to convince the investors. And since they didn't have an already existing department that made satellites, most of that money was used to hire Lockheed Martin to build one. In 1995, they launched it into orbit. That same year, they too made all the necessary deals with many of the larger television networks, and in
So, I think it's probably safe to say that the two of them are the reason why you have Comcast, for example, who owns a lot of networks.
Yes or no?
To, basically keep their relevancy in the market when it comes to television.
Yeah, and I mean that's the same with like AT&T, like a lot of like the true old school like TV networks like Comcast and whatnot. Comcast of course started out like in Arkansas, and then they grew by expanding and buying up the competition, other cable companies, and then recently, last 10 years or so, that's when they branched off into buying like NBC and Universal. Dish Network of course, they own Sling. So
oh, now see, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so they own Sling. They now own Boost Mobile because of the Sprint T-Mobile merger. But at the same time, DirecTV, of course, was owned, by AT&T. It's been sold off into its own company again. So,
all right.
Yeah, it's a lot.
1996, the service that they called Dish TV Network was first made available to the public. They say that the DISH in the name stands for Digital Sky Highway, but I'm pretty confident that it was also influenced by the term satellite dish. I should point out that this was almost a full 2 years after DirecTV, so they were trailing behind from the beginning and continued to trail behind in the following years, showing just how important a 2-year head start can be for something like this. From that point, everything was extremely competitive. They had each other to worry about, as well as the other satellite providers of the time like Primestar and the cable companies. I get the impression that's where they saw their biggest competition. Those are the services that everybody already subscribed to and were familiar with, and these satellite companies had the difficult job of drawing people away from them.
More of everything than you could ever get from cable.
Shortly after the launch of the Dish Network service, the company said that their principal business strategy was to continue developing its subscription television service in the US to provide customers with a fully viable alternative to cable television. Honestly, the whole thing just seems exhausting. It was a long-term business plan centered around delay and sacrifice. The idea that they would spend a bunch of money up front to obtain customers and then make it back over the years as they remain subscribed to the service. Do you see what I mean? I'm talking about things like multi-million-dollar advertising campaigns, launching more satellites into orbit so they can offer more channels and better packages at lower prices. They both reduced the price of their boxes and dishes to below cost and had frequent promotions where customers would get all of the equipment and even months of service for free. And look, I understand the concept of spending money to make money, but these two were doing that to a degree that would have made me uncomfortable. Here, the numbers for Dish Network are more consistently available, so I'm going to show you how it was affecting them financially. First off, this is the revenue that they were generating from the initial C-band operations compared to the Dish Network service. We can see how the satellite service quickly took over almost their entire business, and we can see how it helped them grow overall. They pursued the service because that's where the demand was, and it was their best chance to take things to that next level. But look at what happened to their income. Everything I just described was costing more money than they were bringing in, so they were losing a ton of money to try to gain a customer base. To continue operating, they were forced to go into debt that grew to over $5 billion by the end of the decade. On the other end, DirecTV did have GM behind them, so things probably felt a little safer, but it was the same thing where they were losing money and going deeper into debt. Most of what they were doing was so unproven, so it was unclear if those numbers would ever improve to a level that they needed them to be. It was right around that time when the satellite industry started consolidating. There were these major deals happening seemingly one after another. Some of the bigger examples are in 1998, DirecTV bought US Satellite Broadcasting Company for $1.3 billion, and then the following year they bought a competitor Primestar for $1.82 billion. Those kind of deals scale operations, lower competition, and I guess once they had an established customer base, things started to look a little more stable. I mean, there were still increasing customer acquisition costs, but Dish Network did become profitable. Not exactly the same for DirecTV, but they had a lot going on. Alright, there's too much that can be analyzed here, but I think it would be interesting to follow the path of the ownership of DirecTV. We already know that they were owned by General Motors and Hughes Electronics since their inception in 1990. Their first change in ownership almost happened in 2002, when Dish Network actually offered $26 billion to buy DirecTV, which would have been an insane deal. It would have essentially put one company in charge of most of satellite television. However, there was a third company in the mix of all of this that did not want that deal to happen. News Corp was the owner of Fox, both the TV networks and the film studio, in addition to a bunch of other media-related businesses. The main owner...
Who owns Fox?
So Fox is owned by the Murdochs. But see, it's been split because Fox was also sold because Comcast was going to buy Fox.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But Fox is now owned by, most of Fox is owned by Disney now. But you have new Fox, which is its own independent, which is owned by the Murdochs.
All right.
Yeah.
Owner of News Corp was Rupert Murdoch, who was already actively trying to buy DirecTV. He owned a British satellite company and this would have complemented it, so Rupert Murdoch lobbied against the Dish Network deal and likely played a part in the FCC ultimately blocking the merger. It was actually the first time they challenged a deal like that in 36 years, so it never happened. So then, the following year, News Corp successfully bought 34% of DirecTV for $6.6 billion, which gave them a controlling interest. GM was happy to get rid of it because they wanted to better focus on their core automotive operations, but the setup didn't last long because their interest in DirecTV was transferred to Liberty Media. See, Liberty Media owned 16% of News Corp and they wanted that 16% back, so it was a complex deal that resulted in News Corp owning more of their own company and Liberty Media owning DirecTV. From there, they combined DirecTV with some of their other media assets like the Game Show Network and split them off into their own company in 2009. Then, in 2014, AT&T bought the company for a deal valued at $67.1 billion. They already owned the phone company, of course, so there were bundling opportunities there. However, in 2021, they announced that they would be combining Direct...
So
I know you know a lot about this.
So I want to touch base on this because, of course, hello, work there. So, ironically, as everyone knows, that's probably like the worst deal that AT&T ever invested in. Because you bought a company that was...
I did hear that.
You bought
especially at that huge price tag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the theory was you bought the people at the DirecTV and moved them from DirecTV over to Uverse. The only problem was DirecTV was losing a lot of customers. Uverse was losing a lot of customers. And they were both losing them to the cable company, Spectrum and Comcast. And then you top that on with antique cable system that's still dated in the early 2000s. When your competitors are upgrading their stuff to make it look, flashy. Voice remotes, integration, flashy guides.
Yeah.
Shout out to Comcast, also work there. But, so that's gone down to one of the worst purchases ever. Plus, they sent them into debt. And then, two, you sold the company at a huge loss. So, and it was also, AT&T was trying to also merge it with Dish Network again, but couldn't happen because, you basically monopoly at that point.
Exactly.
In theory, it's a monopoly, but on paper, it's really not, especially now in 2021 where you got all these streaming services out there.
Yeah, true.
But at the same time, it's like the main thing that kept DirecTV afloat, and it's probably still keeping them afloat, is the NFL Sunday Ticket. Because it allows you to watch every game outside of your market. So that's one of the main things. But let's let Company Man do this because, hey...
DirecTV with their other TV services like Uverse and spinning it off into its own company. But that new company is still 70% owned by AT&T, while the remaining 30% is owned by a private equity firm called TPG. And that company, by the way, had an implied value of only $16 billion, which is not a good sign for them. Compare all of that to Dish Network, who has always been their own company with a few little structural changes over the years. For a long time, the company itself was called EchoStar until 2008 2008 when they split into two parts. The main company with the TV subscription business changed its name to Dish Network, while the satellites and the technology parts were split off into another company called EchoStar, so that could be confusing there. It's also worth mentioning a couple of notable acquisitions. In 2011, they bought Blockbuster for over $300 million. To know how significant that is, the timing is very important. It was following their bankruptcy, but they still had about 2,000 locations at the time, all of which, of course, they have since closed. It seems like they were most interested in just obtaining that brand name and utilizing it in their Dish Network service, but as far as I could tell, none of it was too successful, and they probably would have been better off not getting involved at.
So, I'm going to say that. So, because again, work there. So, this is actually one video that I actually know a lot about. So, I'm kind of excited that we got this one. That we got this one dropped in. So, the thing with Dish Network, because from what we was understanding when I was working at Blockbuster, was Dish Network was going to take their Blockbuster pass, which, of course, for people who don't know, Blockbuster was Netflix that came to Blockbuster back in the day and wanted Blockbuster to buy them.
I have heard that.
But Blockbuster laughed at them and said, no one's going to rent DVDs by the mail. Go away. And, well, here we are. But, so that's when Blockbuster launched their Blockbuster by mail, which I had because I worked, so it was free for us. So I had that, and then it was like, and then they had the movies on demand where you can rent the movies and stuff from your Dish Network subscription when they bought them. So if you had Dish Network, you can just pull up Blockbuster movies, and then you can watch, whatever movie you wanted. You can rent it and whatnot.
Okay, but, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it wasn't a good one because they didn't know what to do with it, and as Company Man said, they just ended up getting rid of us. And hence why it bounced to around an industry.
Another significant one is in 2019 when they bought the prepaid wireless brand Boost Mobile for $1.4 billion. Sprint and T-Mobile were merging together, and one of the requirements to allow that to happen was that they had to divest certain stuff like Boost Mobile. So now, Dish Network is actually a major wireless carrier. It might be a good thing for them too, because satellite television, in general, doesn't seem to be moving in the right direction. I'm sure that you could have guessed that with the whole cord-cutting movement and all the streaming services. Everything that I've been talking about this whole time has been on the decline. Dish Network has been consistently losing subscribers. Again, the figures from DirecTV aren't fully available, but they have started to move in the wrong direction as well. Those numbers suggest that satellite television may be a declining industry, which would explain why DirecTV has lost tens of billions of dollars in value since 2015 and why Dish Network is making such a big push into the wireless industry. Let me know in the comments, what do you see for the future of satellite television? I think most of us would agree that its biggest days are behind it, but do you think there's still going to be a place for it? And building on that, what do you see for the future of Dish Network and DirecTV? Will they evolve into something else? Will they continue but on a smaller scale? Or maybe they'll combine together? I don't know, it's a crazy industry. There was so much risk and building that went into it, only to seemingly fade away just a couple of decades later. So any thoughts you have about Dish Network, DirecTV, or anything else in this video, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Today's sponsor is...
I got a lot to say.
Wow. Well, it's just like I was talking about with the whole Kraft mac and cheese video that he did, is basically creating a monopoly. But to not create a monopoly, see how he said when Sprint and T-Mobile merged together, they had to divest something. They had to give up Boost Mobile to somebody else to have because of them merging. Because it would have been too many companies merging together, creating a monopoly. Because now, when you think about it, as far as cell phones go, the major companies is now only T-Mobile,
AT&T,
Verizon, and AT&T. So you literally only have about 3 major cell phone companies to pick from. And so when you come to the whole TV issue, you have AT&T, which is actually DirecTV, and then you have Dish Network, who now is trying to go into the cell phone industry, and you have Comcast,
and then you have Spectrum, and then you have your other.
Well, those are the little smaller.
Here's
the little smaller buddies, the little brothers to the major companies.
For the folks who don't realize about cable, because again, worked at Comcast and AT&T, and Dish Network and Blockbuster, so I know. So the thing is, when it comes to like national cable companies, like actual cable, it's 2 major ones. That Spectrum, which was from Charter. They also bought they also acquired Bright House and Time Warner Cable. Okay, that's how Spectrum is the number 2 cable provider. Comcast is the number 1. So it's like 1 and 2. So you got those two, and then of course you have AT&T. That brings in 3. So when you factor in the cell phones, like you mentioned, Dish Network was already buying like the stuff buying the wireless networks, the Spectrum stuff to make the networks work.
Mm-hmm.
They've been buying that, stockpiling that for years because they wanted to have their own cell phone carrier to become the number 5 cell phone company. It just wasn't. They didn't have the infrastructure until T-Mobile and Sprint came around, and then boom, because Sprint and T-Mobile has been trying to merge since 2009, 2010.
Yeah, I remember that because the government had got involved.
Yeah.
And then it was it calmed down.
Yeah, and then you get the changing of the guards, and it's like, oh yeah, you can merge now.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's like you said, it's a monopoly on the cell phones, but cell phones not really so much of a monopoly because there's hella cell phone companies out there.
It is, but as far as when it comes to the majors, like
your AT&T, Verizon's, T-Mobile.
Exactly.
And that's what people think of. They only think of those three, but in reality...
Well, I mean, when you look around, they have the advertising budget. Yeah. So when you ask someone who doesn't have like a kid, for example, who doesn't have a cell phone, but they want one. Yeah. And if you ask them, oh, well, what company do you want to go with? I don't know, T-Mobile? Because, I mean, you see T-Mobile everywhere.
You see commercials. But then on the back end, you see companies like, for example, Spectrum Mobile, which is from Spectrum's cable company. You got Xfinity
I've never
Mobile.
even heard of Spectrum.
And that's like, when you're here, it's like one of those regional things. And then you got Xfinity Mobile, which is for Comcast. But both of those run off of Verizon cell towers. And then, of course, you got your track phones. You got your Mint Mobile. So it's like you got all
the cheap stuff.
Yeah, which is all running off of, Verizon's, or Sprint's networks and stuff like that.
Exactly. It's still running off of the major companies.
So you got those.
Stuff. So...
And then when you piggyback off of AT&T, it's like, all right, cool, you got your Uverse. And then you had Uverse, DirecTV, and then they got into the streaming with DirecTV everywhere. Then they came into AT&T TV. So it's like you combine them. So it's a lot, As far as what he said, seeing where it's going to be at, were people still trying to cut cable, were people cutting the cord and trying to switch to streaming? I don't say that the TV industry, the satellite industry, cable industry, I don't think it's dying. Because people are going to come back to cable because streaming is not where... And I'm not saying this because I work for the industry and I want people to come back. Please do. But, and I still have cable because cable is 110% better than streaming.
I mean, here's what I think is going on. People are trying to, I'm cutting the cord because I'm going to save money.
Right.
But over time, as we have seen, and someone like myself, I didn't necessarily cut the cord. It was just... where I was, what I wanted wasn't available, which was Dish Network. I was a customer. But where I had moved to, it was no longer available. Mm-hmm. And so all I could get was Comcast. That's all that was offered in the area. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't like Comcast customer service. So I said, screw it, and I've been a Sling member ever since.
Which is owned by Dish.
Exactly. So see, I'm still somehow a loyal customer.
And it's like people, and that's what people always switch from cable. Like my mom, she's like, "Oh, they have horrible customer service." That's what the whole industry, cell phone industry, horrible. It's because, one, speaking back because I worked at Comcast, so I would say from 2010, like 2000 to 2010, we didn't care about customer service.
This was after 2010.
So even up until I gotta say 2015ish, we still didn't care because it's like, yo, you need us. It was all about, hey, you need us. So you're gonna sign up with us,
and that's exactly how I felt. So it's like, oh, okay, well,
and it's just
I'm gonna go and cut the cord, so to speak, and stream.
And the thing I didn't like about Dish Network when I worked there was because it was like coming from a sales perspective from being at Verizon. Well, it was before I went to Verizon. I was always a salesperson, so it was like I looked at it like they were too weak for Dish Network. From my experience, they were too weak with customers. They cared too much.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, we don't do this. Like, yo, you can make so much more money by raising your rates and get more money from your customers that you have instead of just being like giving them this cheap package for low money. Like, yo, you can sell them more packages with more money and then charge them per box. You're bringing more money per customer. Of course, that's not how Dish operated, hence why they were losing money. Then you switch over to me going to Comcast, customer service. Might have been, it was coming on the upswing, but they had that. The cable industry always had that. Oh, it's horrible, this, that, third. Because it's like, yo, you need us. We know you need us. You can't get nobody else, so come to us. But then it's at the same time, people think companies got horrible customer service because how that one person may have. So it's always one of those, oh, they have horrible service.
No, it was multiple people that I had to talk to.
You know.
But at the end of the day, us cut the cord people, is getting to a point where, because like I said, I've had Sling for years now, but it's getting to the point where I'm already paying for internet.
Yep.
And I'm paying for streaming service.
Exactly.
Because Sling is not the only streaming service I have.
You factor in Sling, your internet. You factor in your streaming service, your internet,
service,
your Netflix.
Well, let's see. I have Sling. Mm-hmm. I have internet. Mm-hmm. I have Hulu. Mm-hmm. I have Netflix. Stars, but that's like depending on
it's a subscription, so it's like
exactly. It depends on what show is available that I want to see. Shout out to P-Valley and Power and all the other spinoffs. I do watch those from time to time, but only when the seasons come back do I say, okay, I'm going to set aside some money for Stars for these next few months so I can see these shows.
Power died, and then that was it. Screw the spinoffs. That's my point.
P-Valley is still a good show though. And then Showtime because The Chi.
You know what you got? Because you naming a lot of stuff. You know what you got?
What?
You got cable, baby!
But this is what I'm saying. So when you factor in all of those things that I'm streaming and paying for per month, plus the cost of internet, I may as well have cable.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people are going to start...
Because even the networks, like Discovery Channel and all them, they got their own.
Yeah, so and then it's like, okay, so you start paying for all these channels that you can subscribe to.
You're going to come back to cable.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah. Because at this point, I would rather have like on demand where I can record my shows and watch them later and stuff like that. Because Sling for some reason now has a DVR service, and I'm like, I didn't sign up for this service, but now they have increased their price to include DVR service, a service I'm not even interested in having.
Look, I ain't never gonna get rid of my Comcast because it's like superb, good service, good quality, good cable, good service, good pricing.
Yeah.
You know, I ain't going nowhere. I love cable too much. Okay?
You're loyal.
I'm loyal. I even had it before I started working there. As a customer, I had DirecTV. I hated DirecTV. I hate satellite. It's the most piece of crap service out there. Because when it rains or snows,
I forget about that. The weather issue.
So unless you live somewhere like Arizona where you have to hope and pray that it rains or something, you know, you're screwed if you live in the northern states. So it's like, to that standpoint, it was horrible. It was like the most crappiest piece of service I can ever have. And I would never go back to satellite because it's just a piece of crap product. So that's why I had cable. I had Comcast. And I was like, yeah, the ancient, antique channel guy. But then, of course, technology evolved. So you got the best stuff, voice remotes, all that, home security, TV, internet, whatever.
Yeah, I got to admit, your little Comcast is it's nice.
With that, I would never go back to a substandard basement, antique caveman service like satellite.
All right. And with that being said, if you enjoyed our reaction and our impromptu conversation, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because I promise you we keep these reactions coming. Of course, the link to the Company Man's YouTube channel.
Say Instagram for a second.
Right. His YouTube channel and, of course, the link to the original video will be in the description along with where you can follow us on all platforms. All right. Got anything else?
Please, if you need... No, I'm joking.
Bruh.
No, we catch y'all next time, man.
Bye, y'all.